Okay, we're going to look at the international colour chart. It's called the international colour chart because it's pretty much used the same with whichever colour manufacturer you're using. On the left hand side you'll see that there's a row of colours which have got a 0 at the end of them. Those are the natural tones and they're commonly known as base colours. If you have a look at them you'll see that they'll go from black all the way up to blonde, and then there's a high lift blonde as well. So just for a moment we're just going to concentrate just on those. Okay, if we start at the bottom, we've got black, which is 2/0, which is the darkest colour you can get, although there is a jet black which is sometimes a 1/0 depending on the manufacturer. So you've got 2/0, and then if you go up a colour to dark brown you've got 3/0. Well, the 2 determines how light or how dark the colour is. So the 3/0 is one shade lighter than the 2/0, and it goes up 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, and so on and so on and so on till you get to 10/0, and we'll talk about the 12/0s later on. The number at the beginning, which gives you how light or how dark it is called the depth. So you'll hear that word come up quite a lot, and the depth is how light or how dark the colour is. So if somebody has got a light brown colour, they would have a depth of 5. It doesn't matter what number is after the stroke when you're talking about depth, it's only the number that's before. The number that's after the stroke is a 0 in this case, and that tells you that it's a natural tone or a base tone. And again, base is a word that comes up quite a lot, and these colours are sometimes mixed with other colours, and you'll hear hairdressers say, I've mixed some base in with that colour, and what they mean is they've put some of that natural tone in. Now the word tone is the number after the slash, so the tone of this range is a natural tone, and it just has a 0. There's other tones as well, and they have different numbers after them, but the number before the stroke is always tells you how light or how dark it is, irrespective of what's on the other side of the slash. If you want to colour white or grey hair, you need to be using the natural tones. It's the only tone that gives you 100% grey coverage. So even if you want to use another tone, if you're covering white or grey hair, you need to add some of the natural tone in. You can use the natural tones on their own if you just want a natural colour, but you would always need to use them on their own or mix them in with another colour if you want to colour white or grey hair. So you're always looking for the 0 after the slash, which tells you it's a natural tone and consequently will colour grey hair up to 100%. Okay, let's look at some of the other tones now. Next to the natural tones are the ash tones, and if you have a look at the number after the slash, they have a 1 after them, and that tells you that they're an ash tone. Now if you look at the numbers before the slash, where you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 12, if you remember before, this is the depth, so this just tells you how light the colour is. So 6/1 is one shade darker than 7/1, which is one shade darker than 8/1, etc. If you wanted to use this ash tone, but you were colouring white hair, you would need to mix some base or some natural tone in with it. For example, if you wanted to use 9/1, which is a very light ash blonde, but your client had white or grey hair, you need to mix some of the corresponding natural shade in at the same depth. So in this case it would be 9/0 plus 9/1. Some manufacturers actually pre-mix it and do a 9/01 or an 8/01, and that is ash tone and natural tone mixed together. Okay, if we look at the gold tones, these have got a 3 after the slash, and the 3 is the number for gold. So before the slash you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which gives you the depth, how light or how dark it is. The number afterwards is a 3, and that tells you that it's a gold tone. Okay, again, if you were colouring white hair or grey hair, you would need to mix some natural or base tone in with this colour. Now, because this is done quite often, this manufacturer actually does a pre-mixed colour for you. So there's, for example, an 803. So the 8 tells you how light or how dark it is. The 0 is your natural shade, and the 3 is the gold. So you could use that if you wanted to, instead of mixing 8.3 and 8.0. It's entirely up to you. Personally, I prefer to mix it myself rather than using the pre-mixed version. Okay, if we move over again, these tones here, the copper gold, you notice they have 2 numbers after the slash instead of 1. So the depth is the same, 6, 7, 8, 9, so that tells you how light or how dark it is. But the number after the slash, it has a 3 and a 4. 3 and a 4, 3 and a 4. Now, if you remember before, we said that the 3 was a gold tone. So we know that this has got gold in it. These ones that have a 4 as well, the 4 is the tone number for red. So, for example, this colour, which is 734, it tells you that the 3 has got gold in it, and because it's got number 4, that it's also got red in it. Because the 3 is first, that's called the primary tone. And what that means is there's more of that tone in than there is the 4. And the 4 is called the secondary tone. So if we just take this colour, for example here, the 734, the 7 tells you how light or how dark it is. The 3 tells you that the primary tone is gold, which is 3, and the secondary tone is red, which is 4. Okay? If you look next to it, there's a row here of 4s, 5, 4, 6, 4, 7, 4. These are red. So again, the number before the slash tells you how light or how dark it is, and the number after, which is a 4, tells you that it's red. If you look at these colours here, there's a 743 and there's a 734. Okay, now because they're both the 7, that means they're both the same depth, how light or how dark they are. But the 3 and the 4 are the other way round. They're a 4 and a 3. What that means is that in the 734 your primary tone is a 3, which is gold, but in the 743 your primary tone is a 4, which is red. So in the 743 there's more red than there is gold, but in the 734 there's more gold than there is red. And then as you move along the colour chart, there's just different variations on the same depths. So for example, if we go over to burgundy red, the tones are 4, 5. So your 4 is gold and your 5 is burgundy. So 645 has got a primary tone of gold and a secondary tone of burgundy with a depth of 5. So 745 is 1 shade lighter than 645. If you wanted to use 645 on a client that's got grey hair, you would need to mix some 6/0, which is a natural tone, in with that colour. Then on this particular colour chart, we've got a violet range, which we've got is 6/4, we've got 6 on its own, we've got 2 6s, we've got a 7 range, and then we've also got a 7/3 range. So, for example, a 7/7 is the same as a 7/7/3, except the 7/7/3 is a more golden version of the 7/7. And again, you'd have to mix base in with these colours if you wanted to use them on grey hair. These 2 ranges here, well these 3 ranges here are very good for colouring over bleached or lightened hair. If you wanted to put low lights over blonde hair to tone it down and to break it up, this range is very good. Depending on how warm the colour is, if it's a very ash colour, you'd need to use a warm version. So we've got this range here, which is a 7.5, which is a rich lavender, 5.75, 6.75 and 7.75. That's very good for using on very ashy hair that you want to use for low lights to break up blonde. If it's not that ashy, the 7.73 is a very good range to use. We tend to use that quite a lot in the salon for low lights. And if you want to use this kind of colour but you don't want it too golden, then there's just the 7 range that you can use, and again that's very good for using on low lights as well. You'll notice at the top of some of the rows of tones there's some 12s on the depth numbers. So in the natural range, when you get to 10.1, there's a gap, and then there's 10.0, sorry, there's a gap, and then it jumps to 12.0, and that's called high lift pure blonde. In the ash range, which is a 1, remember, there's a 12.1, which is a high lift ash blonde, and there's also a high lift beige blonde, which is 12.03. These are high lift tints, and they're designed to give you maximum lightening. So if a 10.0 isn't really going to lift as light as you want, you could use a 12.0 incidentally that you will always mix with 12% peroxide. That's the lightest that you can use without using bleach. So these are a range of colours, the 12s, which are specifically designed for lightening, and they're used predominantly for highlights. They can be used on the scalp, but they're mainly used as a highlighting colour. If you want to darken more than 2 shades, you should really pre-pigment the hair. And pre-pigment is putting the red and gold pigment back in the hair that the lightening has taken out. So for example, if you I've got somebody who's got bleached hair or highlighted very light hair, they want to go down to, say for example, a 5 or a 6, you would really need to pre-pigment the hair. The best range for using for pre-pigmenting is the 3-4 range, the copper gold range, because if you remember we were talking about the secondary and primary tones, well it's got 3 and 4, and these are the 2 pigments that you need to put back in the hair. So for example, if you wanted to go down to a 6.0, you would want to put on this copper gold range as a pre-pigment, a couple of shades lighter, 2 to 3 shades lighter than the target depth. So a client wants to go down to a 6 and she's got bleach blonde hair, so you could put an 834 on as a semi-permanent, or a 934, or a mixture of the two, depending on experience really what you prefer to use. So you would mix that as a quasi colour or semi-permanent, and you would put that on all the way through first, and then either apply the 6.0 straight on top, or you could develop the pre-pigment for half an hour and then wash it off just to make sure it's coloured properly, and then apply the 6/0. So for example, if it was a 7.0, if you wanted to go down to a 7.0 from bleach, you would use a 934 as a pre-pigment. So you would mix that with either 1.9% or 3%, put that all the way through, and then either apply your 7.0 straight on top. So you would dry it off with a hairdryer with the tint already on, and apply the 7.0. Personally, I prefer to develop the pre-pigment first. So you would leave the pre-pigment on, then put the 934 on with 1.9 or 3%, put that all the way through the hair, leave that on for half an hour, wash it off, blast dry the hair, make sure it's coloured properly, and then apply the 7.0 colour. If the client doesn't mind a warm colour, there's a way of colouring it where you don't have to pre-pigment, and what you would do in this case is use a very warm colour. For example, the 7.5 range you could use, which is over here. So the 7.5, you could mix this has got a lot of warmth in it. Now obviously what happens is when you put this on the very lightened hair, the lightened hair absorbs the warmth out of this colour, so the result won't be as warm as this. So 575 is a good colour to use 5-4 is also a very good colour to use. You can mix those together if you want to go down to a 5. So you could just apply that just straight on. You don't have to pre-pigment or anything. You would just put that on. You tend to want the colour to be slightly warm rather than slightly ash. The tone that you want to avoid would be ash at all costs. So if a client wants a natural tone and they don't want it warm, you'd need to pre-pigment the colour. If the client doesn't mind it being a warm version, you could just use the 7.5 range mixed with the 5.4. Those tend to work particularly well. And in this manufacturer's colours, they also do a 6.6 as well, which is here, which is a very warm colour as well. You could use that as a pre-pigment as well. Not as a pre-pigment, as a colour all over.